The trade deadline's coming, so it's that time of year again that we look at the NBA trades that would take teams to the next level. And first up is Jeremy Grant. And I'm really hoping he gets traded sometime this month and not stuck on the Pistons. And for that to happen, Detroit should want a young player or draft assets in return. So that gives us three teams. The first is the Cavs. They're currently playing Lauri Markkanen at small forward, and it's been successful, but it's still an awkward fit. So it would be much better to swap out Lauri with Jeremy while giving Detroit an extra first round pick. For the Cavs, it gives them a real small forward that can score and defend while being a great fit. And for Detroit, it gives them a young big man and a pick towards their future. It makes perfect sense to me, and it's solid offer on both ends. The Portland Trailblazers offer is on a similar level, and they need a guy like Grant worse than almost any team in the league, and to get him they'd have to trade Robert Covington, Anthony Simons, and a first round pick. Portland would get to replace Covington with someone bigger on defense and exponentially better on offense, while for the Pistons they'd basically be getting back Simons and a future first. The Blazers have lacked in size and needed to make a trade for a real power forward for years, and this could be their last real chance to do so. It might not even matter though, because the Grizzlies could come up with the best offer if they chose to do it. One that would make sense would be to send Kyle Anderson, Brandon Clark, possibly Zaire Williams in exchange for him. This would give Memphis a very defensive heavy lineup with guys that could also excel at scoring. Having a young Dylan Brooks, Jeremy Grant, and Jaren Jackson Jr. all on the floor at once would be a nightmare for most other teams' offenses. I think Memphis could definitely make the move to get him from Detroit, but seeing their success and the direction their team's headed, maybe they shouldn't even bother. Of course, Ben Simmons still needs to be traded, and at this point I've come to the conclusion that if I'm any team in the league, I'm not trading for him. Because if he's willing to do this because Philly tried to trade him, imagine what he does to the next team that tries to trade him. It won't be pretty. But suppose it happens and someone falls for it. I could see another Jeremy Grant situation going on here. Trade Simmons for Grant and Kelly Olynyk, and I don't see how either team loses. Philly could play him at small forward since they don't need another starting point guard anymore. They'd get a good bench player in Kelly, and Detroit would get a 25-year-old star with potential. If not to Detroit though, the most obvious one that makes almost the most sense is the CJ McCollum for Ben Simmons trade. Already talked about this enough though in the past. But then there's the Hawks, who could use a little more defense in the backcourt. Imagine Trae Young and Ben Simmons playing the 1 and the 2, with Trae still being the primary ball handler. I feel like it could have a similar effect to what we've seen with Lonzo and Zach LaVine. Ben and Trae would perfectly complement each other and make up for their weaknesses. And to get it done, they could send Cam Reddish, Onyeka, and Gallinari to Philly. I don't like the pairing of Danilo and Tobias Harris all that much, but Onyeka has some untapped potential, and I still think in time Cam Reddish can turn into a real star. He's good on both ends, and there's definitely room for him in Philly. And speaking of Cam Reddish, I really looked into finding other trades for him, and there didn't turn out to be too much unless Atlanta just wants to trade him first round pick. Then that's something OKC should jump on right away. But it's okay because I really think Atlanta should hold on to him, or at least get a good quality player in return. But a trade like that just doesn't work out right now. Rumors have been surrounding Jaylen Brown getting traded for quite a bit now too. And like Cam, not many scenarios were realistic or were even worth the Boston Celtics looking into, but I did find one. Now Boston needs another near star and they need depth, something that the Memphis Grizzlies can give them, in a trade involving Dylan Brooks, Kyle Anderson, and DeAnthony Melton. For Memphis, they give up some of their depth that they have so much of in order to get an upgrade from Dylan Brooks, while Boston gets the opposite. I don't know that I'd do this if I was either team, but with all the rumors out there surrounding the Boston Celtics, I wanted to come up with at least one. As for Miles Turner, I didn't need many scenarios to find the perfect move for him, because a trade to the Hornets makes perfect sense, which sends him there in return for PJ Washington, Mason Plumlee, and James Bouknight. James has upside, which is good for Indiana. PJ Washington just isn't the best fit for Charlotte right now, but ages the Pacers down for the future, and Plumlee's an okay temporary replacement at center. But this move gives Charlotte Miles Turner and much needed defense and size at the center position. He'd really round out the Hornets lineup and pair great with everyone. But since the Pacers are looking to start over and rebuild, let's sign trades for Sabonis and Caris LeVert too, assuming they try to trade them as well. Also, I should mention that all these moves don't go together. I'm just independently finding good moves for each of their stars. And for Sabonis, I have two. The first is, I know, it's annoying. You don't want to hear a trade that sends another star to arguably the best team in the league in the Warriors. But this one just worked out too good and it deserved at least a mention. Even though, don't get me wrong, I probably don't want to see it either, but Domantas Sabonis in exchange for James Wiseman, Moses Moody, Kevon Looney, and a first round pick just makes too much sense. The Pacers get a draft pick and two young stars that the Warriors could live without, while Golden State gets the best center they've had in years. He'd play well with their squad, can run the floor, score at the rim, pass the ball, and would be a major improvement from Wiseman and Looney, who they have now. Plus, the salaries match up great. While the other trade would be to the Celtics, who could desperately use a player like him because it would give them their third star. But the only deal that really lined up was Josh Richardson, Aaron Nesmith, Peyton Pritchard, and a future first round pick. Great for Boston, not the best for Indiana, but with Caris LeVert, things were a little different. It's said that a lot of team execs are really wanting to trade for LeVert this year. One scenario sends him to the Cavs in exchange for Cedi Osman, Isaac Okoro, and a first. Colin Sexton's injured now, so it gives Cleveland a healthy shooting guard that fits perfectly next to Darius Garland, and gives them more time to find a trade for Sexton while he recovers. While for the Pacers, Okoro was a top 5 pick in 2020 and still hasn't had a real chance to prove himself given the Cavs roster. So it'd be a great gamble for Indiana, and combine him with Osman and a first, and it's one that they really shouldn't turn down. Now, it wasn't a surprise that the Sacramento Kings have finally made De'Aaron Fox available in trade talks, which is probably something they should have done a couple of years ago. So now they have 3 players that need to be traded as soon as possible. I'm not even going to get into Bagley and Hield trades though, because I've talked about those already for a year or two now. But for Fox, there's not a ton of teams that need a point guard, and there's even fewer where a move actually would make sense. But here's what I came up with. A trade to the Pelicans should probably happen to keep Zion Williamson happy if he ever returns. But if he does, they need to do something after their point guard disaster this offseason. The trade would pair Brandon Ingram up with another high quality player, so it'd be good for New Orleans. And in return, the Kings would get Thomas Satoransky, Jonas Valanciunas, and 2 first-round picks, which could be huge knowing how high those picks could be. It may be a little too much to give up, and it would also be bad news for De'Aaron Fox, making him stuck on a bad team once again. To change that though, maybe he gets traded to the Boston Celtics instead. Marcus Smart has been in trade rumors for a while now, so maybe send him, Aaron Nesmith, and a first-round pick to the Kings. They didn't have their 3rd sort of star they've been looking for, and Dennis Schroeder could be their 6th man. As for the Kings, well, Marcus is still only 27 years old, so they could keep him for a rebuild, or if they still wanted to move him, he'd probably be easier than De'Aaron to find a trade for. Both trades for him are tricky scenarios, and I don't know that they make the most sense for both teams, but without a doubt, something needs to happen with the Kings. Same with the Houston Rockets. They're in a really weird place right now with their team. They have players built to be in contenders, but the rest of the roster built for a complete rebuild. And one of them's John Wall. He may be a little injury prone, but in his first season back after 2 years, he honestly played pretty well and averaged similar numbers to what he did before his injury. So there's 3 scenarios. Not really likely, but the Lakers could try to trade Russell Westbrook and future assets in exchange for him. It'd be pretty weird though to see these two get traded for each other again, and for Russ to wind up back in Houston, which makes this one pretty unlikely. But John Wall would be an okay fit with the Lakers, so I could see it. I could also see him getting traded for Kevin Love. Both men's contracts expire at the same time, and it would give Cleveland a high quality player to fill in for Colin Sexton, and it would mean they wouldn't have a $30 million player coming off the bench. And of course, I say this as Kevin's in the middle of a hot streak over his last few games, but it's probably not sustainable. But if the Cavs want to make this move, it'd be a good one because the Cavs already have front court depth, and there's probably no other scenario in which they'd get to trade Kevin Love in the future anyways. Then finally for the Clippers, we have an actual trade that isn't just swapping 2 players. Rumor has it the Clippers have been interested in going all in for Wall, and they could do so by sending Eric Bledsoe, Ivica Zubac, and Luke Kennard. The idea's been thrown around a few times, and it's not bad. The Clippers shouldn't have to include any draft picks because they're giving the Rockets actual tradable assets. And as is, Houston will be lucky if they even get to trade John Wall at all before his contract's up in 2023. So this could work out for both teams. But if not Wall, Christian Wood would be 1,000 times easier to trade, and every team in the league should want a 17-10 center that can shoot threes and is only 26 years old. And one of my favorite moves would be to the Hornets, and it's a similar deal to what they would offer for Miles Turner by sending James Bouknight, Kelly Oubre, and PJ Washington. It's gonna take a lot to get Wood away from Houston, and this may just be enough to do it. The salaries match up, and it gives them 3 young players with potential. Like I mentioned earlier, I think Miles Turner and his defense may be a better fit here, but if they can't get that done, this is definitely the second best option. The Kings could also send a young Marvin Bagley and 2 firsts in order to get Christian Wood. They'll be good draft picks too, and it'd benefit both teams, but at the same time, I also think it may be time for a complete rebuild for Sacramento, so this may not be the move. As for teams that may consider going all in, we have the Warriors again and the Bulls. The Bulls could trade Kobe White, Derrick Jones Jr., Elise Johnson, and Troy Brown for Wood, giving the Rockets 4 quality young players. This would be good, especially considering that they really wanted Derrick Jones Jr. in the offseason too, and it'd put the Bulls all in for this season, giving them a 5 of Lonzo, Zach, DeMar, Wood, and Vucevic. And if not them, I know, we might not want to see it, but again, it just works out too good. Christian Wood for James Wiseman, Moses Moody, and a first. The Rockets get a top 3 pick who has untapped potential, and the Warriors get a near star on a smaller contract that they can play at center. Without a doubt, Wood's playing already 10 times better than however Wiseman is going to come out this year. And he's still young too, so it really just comes down to how good they believe James can be in the next 5 to 10 years. But that's a wrap. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.